boys and girls. We're back in the one-room schoolhouse we've talked a little bit about. I want to share some more history of schools. I want to challenge you to go on Pebbles Go and look up schools, and you can see schools back in history, different times, and schools now. And I want to share a little bit about that. So this would be similar to once people got settled in towns, a type of school that you would go to, especially if you weren't in a big city. Schools then and now. In the early 1600s, so this is around after the Pilgrims have come, in the early times, when we were just colonies before we became our own country, most kids didn't go to school back then. You were taught at home, just like a lot of you are being taught at home now. Everyone's being taught at home now. That's how it was back in the early colonies. Students learned to read and write, and they wrote on what would be called slates. We would think of it like a little chalkboard. And then schools on the frontier, like the ones where we've talked about them traveling in the covered wagons, those would be far apart, so kids would have to walk miles sometimes to get to that school, and they would be like this, a one-room schoolhouse, all the grades in the same building with one teacher, one room. They wouldn't have many books and they wouldn't have many supplies. They would write on those little slates like chalkboards. And then if we move ahead quite a bit to the early 1900s, if you lived in the city, you would go to larger schools. Then you might have been divided into grades, but rural in the country would still be one-room schoolhouses. And even my mother, like I said, she would have gone to a one-room schoolhouse. And at that time in the now my mother would have been more around the 1930s when she was a child. African Americans in the early 1900s did not go to the same schools as the white children. They had separate buildings. But then around the 1950s, many white and African American children were able to go to school together. The laws changed, and kids went to the same school on a bus. Some walked, and then the schools were larger and had more supplies. So I challenge you to go on Pebbles Go and look at a little bit of that research.